And so already we're experiencing, of course, the effects that are cascading from Ethiopia and here in the country. Now we have an influx of refugees coming back to the country. We have been discussing about the Ethiopian crisis for a long time. And yes, if we don't really have a prime solution in that country, then also us will bear the burden of actually taking care of these refugees. We know how we've been suffering as a country. We are being saddled with that responsibility over Somalia and the refugee in Kakuma and the Dab camp as well. So we'll go back to Irungu Houghton, who's the Executive Director of Amnesty International, to tell us, of course, are we prepared as a country so far? Did this really come from the left side as well? How will we also move forward?
Right, I think it's about 2 weeks ago we were actually in this very studio, and we talked a bit about the implications of the state of emergency in Ethiopia. And our major concern was that if left unaddressed and interrupted, it would cause a lot of displacement. And I think what we've seen now, regrettably, very regrettably, is really just the consequence of a prolonged democratic deficit and an autocratic management style by the EPDRF. And I think now what we're seeing essentially is that all of those people that in the Oromia area and the central part of Ethiopia are now beginning to move across the border. It's not just Kenya. 8,000 people crossed over into Moyale, but I think we need to also think about our colleagues, our neighbors in Uganda, who also have had an influx of Ethiopians more recently. So I think we need to watch this very carefully. I think our Ministry of Foreign Affairs needs to be very adept and diplomatically active to ensure that this does not continue. What has worried me most about this case is the stories and testimonies of people who have been killed in mosques, in their homes and in markets. And really these places are places of sanctuary and safety, not places of death. And I think that is what probably has worried me most about this recent influx into Moyale.
All right. So are we experiencing, so to speak, a sort of that Ethiopia right now is going through the pangs and travailings of, the birth of democracy, right from, the ironclad rule that we've had in that particular country, authoritarian dictatorship. So is this maybe the rough and the smooth of democracy happening in Ethiopia, Dr. Werunga?
I think, yes, we've discussed, and when you look at the history, if you read a bit about the rebirthing of a nation, especially if they're coming out of autocracy, dictatorship, Ethiopia has seen this coming. The suppression that has been in Ethiopia for many years, I think, is coming to the end. And we talked about this, and we said, when you look at the Oromo, you see surrounds Addis Ababa. It's the biggest community in Ethiopia. And I also read that even the 5th district, which is the Somali one down near Kenya, is also having a few issues. So yes, I think to some point I want to agree with you that Ethiopians should be ready for an implosion. It is starting, and you see, you can beat people up to some stage. When they start hitting back, it becomes very difficult. Unfortunately, the population that is being hit and being made to run is all over the city, So the impact will be so massive that Ethiopia will not be in a position to hide what is happening in that country. And we said here that Kenya must have plans on how they are going to deal with the influx of refugees in this country. We know a bit about the Oromo Liberation Front. We know about the Oromo People's movement, and they have a lot of linkages with our friends in Marsabit and Moyale because it is one community. So the ban, yes, I think Ethiopia, and we had a regional meeting here about 2 weeks ago on the Horn of Africa security, and some of the things we were discussing was about how is the region prepared to deal with what is happening in Ethiopia. Because the repression will eventually lead to refugees, it will lead to anarchy in that country, and out of anarchy, people will fight, and even some of people in the military might run away. the population that is being bulldozed, we run away from. But they'll come here not because they are coming here to run away. Some of them will come here to prepare to go back and fight for their cause. So I think as a country, I don't know because I'm not in the Ministry of Interior or Foreign Affairs, but I think it should have been important that Kenya prepares for this implosion so that we are not caught unawares the way the refugees from Somalia caught this country. And the consequences are what we are seeing in Dadaab and in this country in terms of terrorism and transnational crime.
All right.
Yes.
And we know that Ethiopia right now is on a state of emergency for the next 6 months, right? We don't know if that also will be lifted after 6 months or so. Also, lack of a prime minister as well. We don't know, and we've not been given reasons why Desalegn resigned as well. So do you think also maybe the political pressure is there because now maybe Desalegn was actually making sure that some of the political prisoners were being freed, people who are stoutly, against the government or the regime of the day because of the dictatorship and authoritarian rule that we have in Ethiopia. Right now, are these the laborers? Right now, are these the travailings? So the resignation and also the state of emergency, what is it all about?
Dibal, I don't see the current Ethiopian crisis as the beginning of democracy, actually. I see it as the beginning of the end of autocracy. Ever since the days of Haile Selassie to Mengistu Haile Mariam, and then after he was overthrown, really, there's never been a debate in Ethiopia or political space. It's been essentially a police state. And this is a culmination of many years of autocracy and authoritarianism. Now, in the absence of the prime minister at the moment, or at least the state control of power in certain places, a lot of times the opposition tends to suffer. And it gets scapegoated. It gets repressed, and the Oromo, being the largest ethnic group in Ethiopia and having been resistant to the status quo for many years, of course, they're going to get the first flag. Now, Kenya has seen this coming, and we can't pretend we were unaware of the goings on in Ethiopia. This was bound to happen, sooner or later. And what I'm hoping is our Ministry of Foreign Affairs or the Interior actually have a more robust approach, both diplomatically with Ethiopia, to make sure that this thing does not overflow, but also to use its influence on the current rulers within at least the Ethiopian circles to try and calm things down. Today, Ethiopia needs help. They're still trying to figure out a direction of where to go from here. They are confused, and that's why they don't have a leader. The party did not have clear succession mechanisms. And anytime you have that vacuum and lack of clarity when it comes to succession, you are bound to create this problem. And I think as a country, we should respond a lot more forcefully, a lot more strategically, with informed analysis and purposeful intervention. We just can't sit back because soon 50 million Oromos are going to flock to Kenya. What are we going to do? We already can't sustain the refugees we have in this country, in Dadaab and Kakuma. So what are we going to do with another million refugees in the country? I think it's time to act.
So are we sort of in a pickle as well? Because we know there was a lot of flack from the international community as far as the repatriation of refugees was concerned from Dadaab back to Somalia as well. So in light of this situation, and I don't know what really came out from that particular repatriation, if maybe there was, a seeing of eye to eye, especially on that note of repatriation, because there was a lot of, I should say, kerfuffle, so to speak, from the international community.
Yeah, Dibal, I think the repatriation of the Somalis refugees, that idea itself was, the actions slowed down. So they focused a lot on those who willingly wanted to go back to Somalia. For the case of Ethiopia, this is something that we should not be surprised at what is happening in Ethiopia and the influx of refugees starting to come into Kenya. I think what we should be surprised is that we actually do not have more than 8,000 refugees. We've talked about Ethiopia over and over again in this program. It is classified as one of the fragile states. and massive repression, a lack of proper democracy in Ethiopia, with the Prime Minister having resigned under unclear circumstances, Dibal, we should be ready to have more refugees in this country. The countries in the regions have failed over and over again from trying to prevent exactly what is happening in Ethiopia. The international community has also failed. The African Union is headquartered in Addis Ababa. It has failed to address the issue of human rights, democracy in Ethiopia. And the refugees from Ethiopia will not go to Eritrea. They will not go to Somalia. They will not go to Sudan. They are going to come to Kenya. And they will come to Kenya in millions. And we say it again that if 500,000 Somali refugees overwhelm the country, what will happen when we have 2-3 million refugees from Ethiopia? And therefore, the issue of conflict prevention is something that I believe the international community, the regional organizations, the sub-regional organizations like IGAD, have tried but have not put maximum efforts in a bid to prevent such kind of conflicts from happening.
Right. Finally, from Naomi Damba.
Dubal, my colleagues have stated very clearly that this is not surprising. You know, it's been coming and coming for a while. The most important thing for us to do is really what most of alluded to, and that is we need to organize the country to manage this situation. We cannot have over 1 million people marching over into the country unorderly, you know, so we need to have a framework, we need to have a structure, we need to have programs at the border of Ethiopia and Kenya that will allow these people to come in orderly as far as refugees is concerned. We know we have porous border with Somalia, which is still a problem. I've always asked for a free zone, no-go zone, where we guard that border and only allow people to move at a certain point on only designated place. Secondly, Dubar, AU is asleep, just like AOU was asleep for many years. We have a headquarters in Ethiopia, and surrounding people being murdered, and we're not asking Ethiopia to come on the table and address those issues of stability. So what the point is, are we going to continue being in Addis when we're surrounded by people being killed on the street? This cannot happen. And therefore, AU primarily need to take the critical role, bring this issue at United Nations, and address it from a global standpoint.
Right, thank you.